Patron appreciation. Let's talk. This one is going to be from Thor Gabriel Erisman. Thor wanted to discuss a point of view by ex-Turkey ambassador on what was taking place in, you can say, in the West or West Asia, based upon the repercussions from the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Here's an interesting perspective, which is why I found this one fascinating, and I want to delve into it a little bit. So, Thor, this is all you. First, hope everyone is doing okay for this patron appreciation. I think these are probably going to be on Sundays. I mean, this makes more sense. And when we... Okay, maybe they don't make fully sense. I'm trying to think of travel dates. Our travel dates are usually on Sunday. But for the time frame when we're within a particular country, I'm going to be in Poland for weeks on end. So these being on Sunday is perfectly fine. And maybe they just make an adjustment on any random day. But for all intents and purposes, probably have them on Sundays. That's when they seem to keep ending up. So first, I want to thank everybody for coming to the Patreon appreciation. That's those who come. I'm probably making a leap of assuming who's going to be here right now. But apologies for being a little bit late. I've been doing stories all day, and I started looking into, if I'm being honest, there's an article in The Intercept that's talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it's talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis in the context of now. I am a sucker for a history lesson. Some of that I already knew, most of it I already knew, but it's always nice to get a refresher, especially when he delves into the details of the Kennedy administration and what was taking place, and given real history, showing that the history that the United States has been given is mostly nonsense. I delved into that. Then I started delving into this particular issue by Thor that he gave from the Turkish diplomat. I've read so much stuff on the Jamal Khashoggi stuff, but a lot of the stuff is coming from the West. But even the perspectives that go beyond what's typically read are still, for the most part, coming from the West. This was somebody who was an ex-Turkey diplomat or an ambassador who was outside of this country and affiliated with Turkey, making it that much more interesting to hear his perspective on this. And so I kind of want to get into his perspective on what do you think is going to take place in the East as a consequence of Khashoggi's death. I want to talk about some of this right off the bat. For those of you who don't know, Jamal Khashoggi was a journalist for the Washington Post. He was critical of the Saudi regime that's in power now, particularly Mohammed bin Salman, the person who, even though he's a prince, he's thought to be the one that's in charge right now. There's a king, but he is thought to be the one in charge. He, in this power grab, rounded up many of the other princes and forced them to pay him bribes to the point of billions of dollars while he broke and tortured and held them. But all of this was a power grab. Now, the West has been putting this guy forth like he's some kind of reformer and everything else. The guy's a goddamn thug. Keep it real. He's having this war on Yemen that Obama green-lighted because Obama wanted to have, didn't want Saudi to interrupt the peace process or the Iran deal. Obama knew it was going to be a bloody war. He knew there were going to be all sorts of people and civilians being killed, and he greenlit that war anyway. Tech companies and all have been shaking and glad-handing this guy a hand because this guy wanted to build a city in the desert, ignoring the human rights abuses altogether. Until now. One man, one face, as opposed to the faces that blur in Yemen. You can imagine the Washington Post flipping out, and then the Washington Post flipping out Well, it is the Washington Post. It's a paper of record. Not to mention, it's a paper of record for the intelligence services, seeing as the CIA has a huge amount of money invested into the Washington Post. I think like nearly $1 billion. This paper is not even worth $1 billion, as far as I understand it. So let's take this piece by piece, because this is a lot, but I want to dig into it since it was brought up as patron appreciation. First, Jamal Khashoggi, living in the United States as a permanent resident. Jamal Khashoggi had a woman that he fell in love with, Turkish. In order to marry her, he needed to get proof that he wasn't already married. So he went to the embassy in order to get proof, and they told him to come back. Now, the reality of it is, the reason they told him to come back is because they needed to arrange time to get the murder, to get the hit squad. A 15-man hit squad of thick-necked goons, including a doctor with a bone saw that was going to be used to cut him into bits. This wasn't to extract information from him. This was purely to torture him because they didn't like the fact that he was talking smack about Prince. I don't like calling him a prince. I like to call him Mohammed. This idea of prince is like there's some kind of magic or some kind of, magical Muhammad or a prophet or something. He gets into the embassy the second time around. The woman he wants to marry is waiting outside in the car. As soon as he walks in, they're on him. They drag him to one of the other rooms. They chop his fingers off while he's still alive. His screams can be heard. One of the guys who's there essentially said, "You can't be doing this." Now, the reason that we know he said it is because Turkey had the consulate bugged. And immediately when this took place, Turkey said, this is what happened to Thick-Neck Groon. He walked in, he didn't walk out. Turkey knew exactly what had taken place. The consulate was bugged. He chopped his fingers off, one after the next. His screams could be heard all throughout the consulate. They turned the radio up to try to drown the sound and for the people to calm down. One of the men could be heard on the tape saying, "I don't like this. I don't want any part of this." And one of the thick-necked goons said, unless you want to be alive when you come back to Saudi Arabia, you better shut up. And apparently he shut up. After cutting his body off into bits while he was still alive, eventually he was drugged, at which point the doctor cut his head off. They cut his body up, put his body to be essentially dropped into acid. But eventually his body parts were thrown into the garden. This was gruesome, brutal, gruesome, something that you see on television. All of this is taking place 7 painful minutes. That's an understatement. While the woman he loved waited outside. This is not a nice story, to say the least. There's a certain amount of hubris associated with doing this. Understand what we're saying. This is a hit on a guy who was living in the United States, who, a Turkey consulate, he walked in, didn't walk out. She goes to the consulate and says, "Where's Jamal? Where's Khashoggi?" And a blank-faced guy tells her, "There's nobody else here." The thick-necked goons, 15 hit squad, gets off the plane, does the deed, get back on the plane, and go. Turkey knows everything that's happened. The United States also knows, because the United States essentially intercepted communications from the Saudi consulate telling them what was going to take place. Now, whether or not they knew they was going to cut his body up and torture him in this way is unknown, but the United States knew. We don't necessarily know if Donald Trump knew in advance, but at the very least, like I said, the United States knew. Now, this is where this shit hit the fan. Because Ultimately, a man walks into a Saudi consulate and doesn't come out, and Saudi Arabia's like, we have no idea what happened. What do you mean you have no idea what happened? He walked into your consulate. How can you not know? You have video cameras on the front door. You have video cameras on the back door. He didn't walk out the back door. Where is he? And again, Turkey already knew. Immediately, Turkey comes out and says, 15 goons get off of an airplane, one with a bone saw. And the question becomes, why did they have a bone saw? If the goal was just to interrogate him, why did they have a bone saw? They knew what they were going to do. They knew they were going to chop his body up. All of this had been planned in advance. This was purely just to torture and to inflict pain on a human being that they disliked for talking smack about the crown. Here's the catch. Erdogan did not want to take the lead on this. And this gentleman says the same thing. Erdogan did not want to take the lead. Saudi Arabia is a regional power. One of the things that he says is that Saudi Arabia potentially was part of the attempt to assassinate Erdogan in 2016. I did not know that at all. I knew about this coup attempt in 2016. But they're making the argument that Saudi Arabia may have had something to do with the coup attempt. Now, Erdogan didn't want to take the lead on this because Erdogan, at the end of the day, have to deal with the regional power of Saudi Arabia in his neck of the woods. He didn't want to be the one who blows this up. By the same token, he was telling any and everybody who would listen, Saudi Arabia has something to do with this. Saudi Arabia has something to do with it. He's telling everybody and their mama that Saudi Arabia had something to do with it, but he wouldn't take the lead himself. The hope was that the United States would be the one to take the lead. And so Turkey dripped information out into the press over and over and over and over and over again. One story after the next, one story after the next, putting pressure, political pressure, to try to get other Western powers in the United States to take the lead with regards to action in this case. Donald Trump didn't want to have anything to do with it. The problem is, this became a pain in the ass for Donald Trump because this started to turn into an attack on Trump just by proximity. Donald Trump is friends with this guy. Donald Trump is okay with this guy. This guy's a brutal killer. This guy's a thug. This guy is doing this war in Yemen, and this guy cold-bloodedly killed the Washington Post columnist. What is Donald Trump going to do? Is Donald Trump going to sit here and do anything? Mike Pompeo, when the pressure gets to be too much, gets on an airplane. Donald Trump is in the media saying, this was the worst cover ever. The political force, the political will forcing him to capitulate on this and to, for the most part, own up to the fact that the guy who he had invested all of this confidence in was a brutal thug and a killer. We already knew he was a killer, but a brutal thug and a killer at this point. Mike Pompeo gets onto a plane and goes to Saudi Arabia. The reason Mike Pompeo got on that plane to Saudi Arabia because he was trying to get across to them, this isn't working. The narrative that you're putting out that you have no idea what happened to the guy as if the guy was abducted by aliens doesn't make sense. You may sell that shit to your own population. The rest of the world doesn't buy it. They look at you as brutal killers already with the Yemen conflict. This is worse. Not worse as an absolute, but worse in the context of people being able to see this man who had gone to a consulate for love and had his body chopped up with the screams going throughout the consulate. Saudi Arabia finally comes back and says, okay, we just wanted to question him, and Khashoggi gets into a fight with 15 men. The second story is just as ludicrous as the first. And then Mohammed bin Salman, the guy who most likely ordered this hit, comes out and says, I knew nothing about this. And as a price, this kind of political price, gives over the 15 men who were responsible for the actual killing, even though he is the one that's hired to hit. Meaning, the person who ordered the hit would never come to justice because that person to some degree is insulated. That person made a choice to kill this guy. But the fact of the matter is the political penance, the people who actually paid for it, were the underlings. Some people lost their posts, but he tried to make the argument, I knew nothing about this, it was their fault, but they will be punished. The person who did it may, physically, but the person who ordered it, not so much. Not so much. The rest of the world does not believe him. They don't believe Saudi Arabia. They know that most likely he was the one that ordered this hit, that none of these people would have done this without his explicit command and his explicit order. But this penance was enough, at the very least, for Donald Trump, for political cover, to say, look, we're not giving up billions of dollars in weapons deal for this guy who wasn't an American citizen. However, we will sanction the individuals who are supposedly involved. Mohammed bin Salam, MBS, was the one that ordered it. But this gives Trump administration a bit of political cover to say, look, the people who are responsible and are guilty are being punished and being sanctioned. We're not changing our relationship with Saudi Arabia on this. The rest of the world, however, a little bit different. The European Union has been holding these talks on whether or not they were going to sanction him. Angela Merkel has stopped weapon sales to Saudi Arabia. Certain countries like Australia has taken actions in order to push back against the Saudi Arabian government. Mind you, this government was murdering Yemenis wholesale. And yet, this was the thing that created the political will. Now, I'm getting to that point because I want to give the backstory to what was taking place before getting to what the Turkish gentleman is having a conversation about. 17 minutes, Jesus Christ, that's way too long. All right, let's go to the Turkish gent. Here, one last point. There's a question on the direction of Saudi Arabia. Meaning, these princesses, it's somewhat fluid. Even though he's consolidated power to a certain degree, it's unclear whether he can hold on to that power, especially with something like this, because this is considered to have weakened him. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the thought, that this has somehow weakened him, at least from the standpoint of the international community. It's hard to know if that's true. I mean, you have a country that's cutting off heads and cutting off hands and crucifying people. So it's hard to know whether this particular act was enough to weaken his leadership. I would say what weakens him is this idea that he's attacking a podunk country in Yemen and he can't pacify that particular population. The United States has had a relationship with Saudi Arabia going back since the FDR with this idea of oil for protection. You give us oil, we will give you weapons, we will give you protection. Add into Israel for this with this idea of this kind of fulcrum in the Middle East with an eye towards Iran. Now, an argument could be made that the Yemen war and what is taking place with Khashoggi gets in the way of that, meaning it blunts this idea of the actual focus. You heard Wesley Clark saying that there were going to be 7 countries in an X number of years, and they have assiduously stuck to that plan, whether it was Democrat or Republican. They might have been hit their head on certain things. They hit their head on Syria, but they've stuck to that plan. Saudi Arabia and Israel, in this odd mix, were working in tandem with this. Turkey, not so much. Erdogan, who's normally boisterous, not so much here. And he's taken the back seat, while at the same token pushing this idea forward that these guys murdered this guy. All right. Now, let's go to this gentleman. There are two main clips. One clip has to do with what is potentially... Okay, let's do this one first. I think this one is talking about Erdogan. And before we go too far, I don't want to miss... let's see. I'm sorry, guys. Let me check the Streamlabs. Give me 1 second. Come on, 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 come on. Yes. Yes. Pronunciation error. I normally don't complain about this, but when you mispronounce MBS as Mohammed bin Salam instead of Mohammed bin Salman, you're calling him Mohammed, son of peace. You can see why my... I see. Mohammed bin Salam instead of Mohammed bin Salman. Thank you. Salman. Thank you. My pronunciations can be rather brutal. All right, so let's go into this scene right here. So this is the ex-Turkey, ex-ambassador to Turkey, MK, oh man, this is going to be another pronunciation, Badrakumar on the future of West Asia. This was a fascinating conversation between the two. Like I said, most of it, a lot of it, we've discussed prior in some of the other videos. But when they get into this idea of the future of Saudi Arabia and the future, meaning the association between the United States, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and what this has created in regards to this kind of problematic thing of foreign policy. This conversation gets really interesting, especially since it's coming from somebody who's not of here, if that makes sense. Let's take a look at this. So this is 14:51 minutes in.
Of Al Arabiya, based in Dubai. Now, who is a very important figure in the media circuit in the Gulf.
All right. So he goes into an explanation of the thought was, if Trump is putting into a political situation where he has to push for sanctions, because you had members of the United States who are on the left and on the right who are saying that our relationship with Saudi Arabia needs to be changed and revamped. Now you have some people who are saying MBS needs to be moved out and we just need to move somebody else in, another plague in a Plinko chip, and we can just move on. But listen to what he's saying. Because what he's saying, I've reported on this the other day, but he's going to go into a little bit more detail in regards to what Saudi Arabia is threatening the United States. If you try to sanction us, you will pay for this. Donald Trump was trying to get Saudi Arabia to increase the oil production. And in trying to get him to increase the oil production, Saudi Arabia told him to kick rocks. We've already increased it enough. Now, this led to Donald Trump saying, Mohammed bin Salman, let's just say MBS. MBS wouldn't last 2 weeks without the backing of the United States. Now, you can imagine this is somewhat of a denigrating thing to tell a leader of another country that you are there at my grace. We put you there in order to spread, the prevent nationalism, and we arm you to the teeth because we want you to do what we want you to do in that region of the world. Now, if you're getting too big for your britches, in which case Donald Trump is berating him in this case. Take a listen to what he said Saudi Arabia was potentially going to do. I read some of this, but he goes a little further.
Gulf as a whole. There, they have threatened that they have disclosed that they have lined up 30 measures the Saudis have to retaliate if the Americans did anything against their regime. And these included that number one, that they will ignore they will no longer accede to Trump's request to increase output of oil to make up for the shortfall of Iranian oil following the sanctions next year. That is number one, which means they said we will allow the price to rise to $100, $200, even $400, which means that they have threatened that they will bring down the Western economies. Winter's just beginning, this time. Secondly, they have said that they will no longer trade in dollars. And they used, in fact, the expression that they may take something like another currency like Chinese yuan.
These are severe threats. Like the first one from the standpoint of the dollar. Donald Trump has gone into this idea of trying to punish Iran with these sanctions after the pulling out of the Iran deal. Saudi Arabia has upped the production of oil in order to compensate for the oil that Iran is not producing, or the oil that the United States is not taking from Iran. In addition to doing that, there's this secondary thing where Donald Trump is terrified that if he goes into an election campaign, be it midterms or in the 2020s, and the price of oil skyrockets, that the foreign policy foible will fall back as a cascade effect on him, and he would get blamed for people paying a ton of money at the pump, which is part of the reason why he wanted them to increase the oil production. Saudi Arabia is saying, what about $400 of oil? Is that what you want? Do you really want to stab yourself in the side like this? Let's keep going. As for the second one, oil is traded in dollars. Part of America's strength in this is that oil is traded in dollars. I'm skeptical about whether or not the yuan or something like that could be traded, but who knows? You could trade it in whatever you want. The question becomes whether or not they're willing to go through with that particular threat, depending on the sanctions that are applied. I'm skeptical about the sanctions that will be applied, and certainly not to MBS. Let's keep going. There's more.
Which of course would endanger the dollar.
Banking system, the Western banking system as a whole, and this. They said they will pull back the investments in America, which they gave a round figure of $800 billion. They will pull back that.
Keep in mind, Saudi Arabia buys our weapons. This is, for all intents and purposes, a jobs program. They spend a ton of money in this country, and a lot of that money is in weapons. You can think of all the weapons manufacturers throughout all the United States. If that money starts to dwindle, people will start losing jobs, and they would start blaming Donald Trump. Now, this is a grim way to make money. And the money that we spend, in many respects, on our own weapons could be applied to, let's say, domestic jobs. But we don't do it that way. We use all this money and we spend all this money on weapons and everything else. Well, they buy our weapons. In fact, they picked up the shortfall when the Pentagon wasn't buying as many weapons as they typically buy. They're saying, what if we stop? Our relationship with Saudi Arabia goes both ways. These are real threats, and these things will hurt. They are not without teeth. Let's keep going.
they said that they will give a base to the Russians, and they mentioned the place, which is a clear sign that some discussions have taken place.
This is going to change Saudi Arabia, it's going to change the West Asian situation. Of this, there is very little doubt today, isn't there?
I think so, because you see, the loss of face I mentioned in the Arab Street, already the GCC is unraveling. And GCC has become actually defunct. GCC is not there. There's no regional security architecture there. And obviously the Crown Prince has taken a lot of battering. And I doubt if he would be able to get away with the same kind of behavior in future. And now this would have useful fallouts. Now I don't want to link it, but I read in the Russian press yesterday that Bolton is going to Moscow on Monday to discuss Syria. Now, definitely there is going to be a fallout, therefore, on Syria, where the end game is going on. And if the Saudis pull out from there, this is one aspect. And then there is a mounting criticism in the US about the horrific things going on in Yemen.
Increasingly difficult to defend.
Yes, and an opinion is building up even in the Congress that these powers should be withdrawn from the executive to send arms to the Saudis and Emiratis in Yemen and so on.
Not the question of arms, they're also in fact in the command control centers, which are directing the airstrikes.
Yes, in the sense.
But this has definitely weakened bin Salman, his policies, and Saudi Arabia at least in the global mix.
I think it'll put him. Let's say it'll put him on the defensive, and now the attention will turn to the succession.
All right, this part gets fascinating. He would know better than me. His point, he's going to make a point about succession, meaning whether or not there will be some kind of power changeover because of the weakness associated with Salman. I keep calling this man, I keep screwing up his name, Salman. Salomon. In fact, let me go back and hear him pronounce this one more time. I'm sorry.
They're also, in fact, in the command control centers, which are directing the airstrikes.
Yes, in the sense.
But this has definitely weakened bin Salman.
Okay, bin Salman. His argument is bin Salman has been weakened. Now, if they want to maintain a certain association with Saudi Arabia, it becomes more difficult to make that association if bin Salman is the one who's at the helm or in charge at the helm. And because of that, would there be a potential for a changeover? Now that's fascinating. It never quite occurred to me that there would be a changeover because ultimately those things are internal politics. And even though all of these countries may be, complaining and moaning and bitching and everything else, at the end of the day, it boils down to what takes place within the confines of Saudi Arabia. Bin Salman has been able to consolidate his power base to some degree. He's been murdering Yemenis left and right. He took the Lebanese prime minister hostage and made him give up his prime ministership. He has another gentleman that's in prison, that's a journalist for speaking out. He's not been a nice guy. That's an understatement. But in the Khashoggi case was so brutal. And yes, I understand that he's murdered thousands of people, but he's done that with the green light of Obama. So it's not like it's him murdering by himself, and the United States has assisted him in those killings. But this was horrific. You're talking about cutting a man's fingers off and chopping his body parts while the man is screaming bloody murder as his body is being chopped up alive until they get to the point where they drug him and cut his head off. That's particularly bad. Let's hear him. The question becomes, does that weaken bin Salman enough where they would need to have a changeover of power in order to keep a certain continuity of relationship with Saudi Arabia. Let's hear his answer to this. I found this answer interesting.
His policies and Saudi Arabia at least in the global mix?
I think it'll put him, let's say, it'll put him on the defensive, and now the attention will turn to the succession. And I think his focus now would be to retrieve the lost ground, to see that he becomes the king.
Ensure the inner control that he has is doesn't go away.
So if the Saudi consensus for projecting this sort of an acknowledgement of mistake, if the Saudi consensus involves change in the hierarchy, do not rule it out. The opponents may use this as an opportunity to defang him or remove him.
Thank you, Ambassador Bhadra Kumar, to be with us. You, of course, have
An argument has been made that Khashoggi chose the wrong side. Now, I don't know why this would justify the murder of Khashoggi at all. And I think usually this is brought up in the context of the Western media is painting an image of Khashoggi that is not necessarily indicative of what Khashoggi was. It's almost turning him into a martyr, especially within the context of the Western media. I'm fascinated by this aspect that failing to achieve his objectives in Yemen, I mean, because after all, Saudi Arabia is armed to the teeth. Also, like billions and billions of dollars in weapons. And they are bashing the devil out of the poorest country in that region. And they still can't accomplish their military objectives. Not to mention they're murdering a large number of innocent people. And starving and using weaponized disease and all this other stuff. That, for whatever reason, hasn't weakened him sufficiently. But the murder of one man, apparently, potentially, has. This is a fascinating story. Let's see who's here. If anybody's here. Am I lusting after this story on my own? And lusting is too strong. I'm just fascinated by the dynamics of the story. Let's see. We've been taught to confuse the wheat with the chaff. No more colonialist corporatism. Okay, don't know how that applies. The House of Saud, I think that's supposed to be S-A-U-D, is weak internally. The king and prince will be changed out. No war. We'll see. I'm skeptical on that, though. King, maybe. I don't think the prince is going anywhere. We came, we saw, he died. Oh, too soon. Too soon. Too soon, Balthazar. Too soon. B. Vargas, 78. It's hard because they hold all the cards. The country makes a stand against them too strong, they'll devalue our currency. And given that we are less self-sufficient than for a long time dependent on the global trade, that really hurts. You know, that threat about the oil would hurt. Like, I can't imagine $400, $200 a barrel oil. And they would blame Trump for that. At least I think they would blame Trump for that. Burnman 23, the United States will finally attack Saudi Arabia. It never happened if they actually killed the petrodollar. I don't think they would attack them. It wouldn't be that blunt or brutal. If anything, they will probably try to have a change out to get a continuity of interaction between the United States and Saudi Arabia. But attack them, I don't buy that one. I don't buy that one at all. Creative experiments. Yeah, the United States won't attack Saudi Arabia. It will be called stabilizer. Yeah. Agreed. Renewables should be the cheapest without subsidies by quite per kilowatt. Renewables should be cheaper without subsidies by quite a bit per kilowatt. we have been putting out a lot of renewables. So it does seem like that's something that the United States has been doing even without the Trump administration. Fracking is going to bankrupt. Fracking is going bankrupt because price of oil dropped. The interesting thing is, if I'm not mistaken, the United States has been exporting oil. Like, we're an exporter at this point. But from my understanding, the oil that we export is not the same oil that we get from Saudi Arabia, or for that matter, the same oil that we were getting from Iran. So the export is not necessarily the same thing. Garnome. 200, 400, is it going to happen? That quote was from Saudi television station manager. I'm glad you're that confident. It was a threat. The guy put that threat out there. They knew what he was talking about. It's true, fracking isn't profitable with low oil price. Yes. Well, insufficient investment into green energy is why this sucks so much. Yes, yes, yes. I mean, part of the reason we're dependent on these guys is because we haven't invested in our own infrastructure. A green energy new deal would dramatically assist us in getting off this idea of reliance on what takes place in the Middle East. Not just that, it's just right. It's just right. We could do better. We could be less reliant. Agreed. News sign reads, U.S. military for sale, Nicholas Gray. Nicholas Gray. All right. Going green fixes climate, all of the Middle East foreign policy and economy. Yeah, Beltazar, I to some degree agree with you on this. Breaking the reliance on Saudi Arabia is done through clean energy. Like, the moment that we develop our own infrastructure, our own resources dealing with green energy, those jobs are here in the United States. That energy is clean, and we don't have to deal with the foreign entanglements of the Middle East. The thing is, the entanglements of the Middle East is not purely just a thing of oil. It's also a thing of dominance. The United States is taking the position, at least based on, what's the name of the book? What's the name of the book? Charles Johnson. There will be no other countries that will pose a threat to regional dominance. Meaning, this idea of having another Soviet Union is off the table. What that means, though, is that you're in perpetual conflicts all across the globe because there will always be regional powers. This idea of a unipolar world no longer exists. The United States was playing the game as if it was a game that could be won as opposed to something that was a perpetual thing. Well, that was wrong. This idea of full spectrum dominance across the entire world. Well, for that, you're going to have certain fiefdoms. Israel is a fiefdom. Saudi Arabia is a fiefdom. They're willing or they're able to expand power into the Middle East. This allows a certain direction in regards to Iran. Full spectrum dominance puts you in a conflict constantly. There will always be regional powers. And if your policy is that we're not going to allow regional powers, then you're going to be in conflict with the regional powers. Now, in case of Saudi Arabia and Israel, we've armed them to the teeth. And in arming them to the teeth, Israel is going to do our bidding in the Middle East. They're going to be our attack dog. People think it's the tail wagging the dog, and to some degree it is the tail wagging the dog, but it's also the other way around, where they provide attacking in that region of the world when we ourselves don't want to do it. It's not just the oil. It's also the dominance. It's also the dominance. Creative experiment. Funny how people cheer when the price of oil drops. USA never cheers when Facebook stock goes down. I don't know what that means. I'm going to channel my inner Chuck Todd and ask if we have to... I'm going to channel my inner Chuck Todd and ask if we can blame Russia yet. Gardner, yes, full spectrum dominance is a pipe dream. These fools and other private sector entities think they can manage the complexities. They can't. No, they can't. Like, this is a game that they can't necessarily manage. There is no way to win this game. China is a regional power. Russia is a regional power. Iran is a regional power. If you've tried to have full spectrum dominance, you've lost. China and Russia already work in military tandem and has already said that the United States can go kick rocks and go fuck themselves. And this idea of creating this kind of situation where they take down Syria and move on, well, part of the reason that Russia and Iran bolstered Syria was because Iran knew it was next. And the last thing that Russia wanted is the United States taking down one of its old, not necessarily a client state, but certainly a state that it was close in contact with. It's only the dominance. Oil is just the tool. Yes, I think I agree with that. I think it's both. Honestly, do think it's both. I think we do have a reliance on oil. By the same token, there is this thing of full spectrum dominance. Like, for example, trying to take down Syria wasn't about oil, but it is in the Middle East. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they wanted to take down Syria with the idea of a launching pad to get to Iran. They've set fire to one country after the next, be it Iran, Afghanistan, Libya, like outright destroyed countries using terrorists to try to take down Syria, with emphasis on moving into Iran. This is, this is insane. Khashoggi was a Saudi Arabia propagandist, agrees with Saudi bombing in Yemen. The Real News is a good video. Yeah, that video is really good. That video is really good. California elaborate on the matter. Yeah, that video is really good. Look, I never tried to make Khashoggi out into anything else other than somebody who was murdered by the thugs that are in Saudi Arabia. And regardless of what he was, he still was murdered. He still was murdered. Would you consider calling him one less thick-neck goon, Sam Cedar, from now on? At least making an alternative nickname. One less thick-neck goon. Oh, God, that's funny. Instead of one less concentration camp, one less thick-neck goon. Nikki, Russia and China have been swooping to create ties with any country that would get tired of us. Yes. And China has gotten to the point where they're even trying to have remove the dollar as reserve currency, trying to go with either the yuan or go back to the gold standard. Yeah, they are. But it's in their geopolitical interest to do so. I mean, they've aligned themselves with Russia. I mean, with Africa. I've just came from Africa. Chinese are all over the place. Like, when you go to the casinos, they're all over because they have their own areas where they congregate. And they've invested massively in Africa. Massively. It was funny, some of the articles at the time in Kenya was talking about how Western powers had opened them up to Chinese influence because Western powers had left Africa vulnerable to, you could say, predatory influence by China. It's fascinating to read this stuff if you're in Egypt or if you're in Kenya for that matter, I suspect all throughout the continent. Not to mention making alliances even with Venezuela. Yeah, they're trying to. The media solely represented Jamal Khashoggi. He was an intel agent and a two-faced Saudi loyalist. Yes, he used to work with the Saudi. Yes, agreed. Khashoggi was described as a reactionary on Real News. Yes, he was. Media is run by industry, and industry has become government, even though most industry owners have safe places and accounts abroad. China invades countries by investing in the local economy. Yes, U.S. invades country with bombs. Yes. At least now they do. Yeah. Sure, let's go with Sam Passover Cedar. Look, the reason I say one concentration camp less is because Sam Cedar made the argument that he would vote for a candidate if the candidate was building one concentration camp less. That's the only reason I came up with it. It has nothing to do with him being a Jew. It has everything to do with the argument that he was making about supporting candidates who was supporting concentration camps. I thought it was insane. I thought it was a ridiculous thing. Putting it as one concentration camp makes that point extraordinarily clear of this guy would support a candidate who's supporting one concentration camp less. Like the Japanese attempted to invest in the United States real estate in the 1980s. Jamal is Jew bashing Sam Cedar again. Oh God, has nothing to do with Jew bashing. Low blow. It's not a low blow. It's not a low blow. Your boy made that argument. I would say you need to take that up with him on making that argument for supporting that. Gardenome, speaking of the centrists, did anyone see Pacman versus Jesse Lee Peterson? I have not. They had a debate. I have to check that one out. If the United States stopped buying oil from Saudi Arabia, doesn't their ability to pressure in the region greatly diminish? Well, yeah. I mean, keep in mind, part of the reason that the United States was bolstering Saudi Arabia had to do with the prevention of nationalist movements in those regions. I mean, if you had nationalist movements in those regions, those countries started feeling themselves, these left movements of trying to establish something that goes beyond this kind of Saudi Arabia's dominance, well, then the United States will have all of these little fires that they have to deal with. There's an awesome quote by Eisenhower on this, saying how much we need the Saudis because we need them to essentially tamp down on nationalistic fervor throughout the region. It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Pacman versus Peterson, it was pure comic gold. Oh God, I have to look that one up. The trade surplus weapons of sales of the UK is offset by the deficit in France and Japan. This is so useful to the neoliberal system in the United States and the UK. You know, the wild part about this is, after Khashoggi died, the question became, are you going to care about the fact that they just brutally murdered this man or weapon sales? Now, the European Union has certain rules against stuff like this, meaning they have rules against torture. They're not supposed to interact with these governments when these governments are tortured or have done something like this. They've been ignoring their own rules in order to interact with Saudi Arabia and weapon sales and all this other stuff. Britain is probably going to be a different story since Britain is crashing out of the European Union in its Mad Max Brexit. But from the standpoint of the European countries, they're not supposed to be selling weapons like this. They're not supposed to be doing it. Creative experiments. USA is a global oil market. It's not just one country does. USA has no laws to ensure domestic oil stays in the United States. Yes, that's true. USA sells to the highest global bidder. Yes, that's true. Jesse keeps saying, I'm black. What? I don't know. I don't know who Jesse Peterson is. I know him by name, but I don't know who he is. Jesse keeps saying, I'm black and slow. Make it simple. To Pacman, it's super cringy. He keeps implying Pacman's. Are you serious? Are you serious? Oh man, God, I have to find that video. Pacman and Peterson. Oh God. Oh, that's hilarious. That is so funny. I can't, man. Pacman is not a slouch from the standpoint of debating. I've heard him debate once or twice. He's not necessarily a slouch. But yeah, that is cringy, saying I'm black, make it slow. Yeah, that's weird. That is so bizarre. I thought David the Fudge Pacman is gay. No, he's not gay. Jesse Lee is the ultimate Uncle Ruckus. Oh, God. That's horrible. Peterson is the character from Tarantino movie. I heard somebody say that he hates blacks more than anybody else who hates himself. Yeah, that's so weird. That's so bizarre. Pac-Man is strong debating skills. Yeah, he's not a slouch. What's his name too? I would. Sam Cedar is awesome at debating. People think that they can jump on Cedar and that jump on Cedar at their peril. See, he's not the guy to jump on. Baltazar, if the United States stops consuming and producing oil and goes green, how does the whole Middle East situation change? Well, it depends. The United States still wants emphasis or access and strategic dominance in that region of the globe. So the situation may change from the standpoint of us being tethered to Saudi Arabia, but it may not necessarily change in us selling them weapons, if that makes sense. Oh, Dan Campbell, thank you, man. Thank you, Dan. Cedar is okay to debate. Pac-Man is stronger. I disagree. Now, maybe it may depend on who we're talking about him debating. And Dan Campbell, thanks, dude. And leave a comment. I like when people leave comments. I've heard Pac-Man. I've heard Cedar. I've binge watched Cedar debates. Cedar is strong at debating. He is not the person to jump on in a random thing. Pac-Man and Cedar got devoured by Cal. He was star at Politicon. Are you ever going to go to Jamal? I got to be invited. You overestimate my reach. You vastly overestimate my reach. And yeah, Cal is a beast. Cal is awesome at debating. Baltazar, Cal is good at debating, but he's far from the furthest left in the progressive sphere. Fair enough, but you don't have to be good at debating. Creative Experiment. Cedar and Tom Hartman are great debaters as long as they keep putting Jill Stein in jail for attending debates. Cenk is pretty weak at debate compared to his peers. Yes, he is. I heard him debate Ben Shapiro. I didn't think Ben Shapiro won the debate, but Cenk was pretty weak in that debate. Even his stylistically, he was weak in the debate. Cal was amazing at Political. Yeah, Cal is strong. Cal is very strong. I like Cal. Politicon is a circus. Yes. Punch and Judy. You know, those old Punch and Judy dolls? That's what Politicon is. Debating is a skill and doesn't mean poor debaters are wrong in their views. Stephen Dose. Yo, that's true. That is true. That is very true. Have you heard some sort of ruffus between Tim Pool and Cenk at Politicon? I don't know who Tim Pool is. Cenk was a letdown at Politicon in my honest opinion. I didn't see all of Politicon. I saw bits and pieces of it. That shouldn't be the competition. Honestly, fairness and persuasiveness should be Cal and Jimmy are the best for the movement. Yeah, Cal is... I like Cal. I've liked Cal for a while. Y'all acting like debating matters. No, I'm not. No, we're not. Don't misunderstand me. A debate doesn't change a person's perspective. Not most of the time. I mean, if you talk about politics, no politician has ever got up, listened to the other guy and says, you know what, I was going to have a completely opposite opinion, but now that you said that, nobody has ever done that. By the same token, there may be people who watch it, maybe, but under normal circumstances, no, I don't necessarily think it changes minds. That said, it is a skill, and in doing so, some people are better at it than others. Even if they're wrong, some people are better at it than others. Cal could be beaten from his left, but no one usually goes there. Ben Shapiro's literally only debate skill is that he talks fast enough to get another. Yes, he just talks fast. Like, it was a stylistic difference between him and Cenk. It wasn't that I thought Cenk lost. It just, Cenk was like low energy in that debate. He looked like he was, sleepy or something. Like he had just woke up. Cenk flipped out sitting in the audience because his nephew disclosed how much he was making. Yeah, it was like $100,000 or something. But to be fair, they live in California. TYT is terrified of their financials being disclosed. Did you see the thing where they did a commercial for Beto to go against Ted Cruz. Now, the catch to this is Beto raised like $30 million. Now, a bunch of centrist Democrats, Beto refused to take any super PAC. He discouraged super PACs from working with him. But there were other super PACs that said Beto can kick rocks and that said, hey, we're going to help Beto, and then siphon the majority of the money off to their own ends, just using Beto as kind of a touchstone in order to try to raise money. I wondered if the thing that Uyghur was running was something similar, like a similar scam. I don't know. Yeah, I'm embarrassed by the disciples of Shapiro. The quality of his arguments of that fourth grader. He's dumb on purpose of a too-big corporate charlatan. Yeah, it's just, it's nonsense. I met Beto personally. He's way more neoliberal than you can imagine. Oh, really? Really? Wow. I mean, he's been running that campaign like he's a flaming lefty. I watch Real News, not TYT. Yeah, I love Real News. Real News is awesome. Once Jimmy Dore goes, I'm through. Grant Jarvis, I think a lot of people are like that. I heard from somebody who is affiliated with TYT that during the next election campaign, 2020, Dore is not going to be able to stay there. I don't know if that's true or not, but the argument that was put forth was there is no way that they're going to be able to keep Dore there with them providing a united front. They are going to want to have a united front against Donald Trump, and Dore's not going to be on board for that. Now, to be fair, Dore wasn't on that for last time, but they weren't in a world where Hillary Clinton lost reality shows. I don't know if that's true. I guess we'll see when it comes up, but it's possible. It's possible. Groundhog Day, yeah. Jay, yeah. I scanned Beto's legalized briber list a while back, and there were a lot of corporations there, I think. Now, supposedly, the only money that he took was from small sources. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's not neo-lib. So, fair enough. After midterms, people will start announcing 2020 runs, and we can watch democracy die all over. Democracy dies in the darkness. No, I think it dies on the pages of the New York Times. I agree. Our political environment is Groundhog Day. The wild part about it is nobody seems to know that. Like, you guys know that. But why don't everybody else know that? You could replicate the same politician over again and people just go. Balthazar, Beto lied to my face about why he wasn't co-sponsoring HR 676, and he talked about not taking corporate money while Chucky the Shoe was sitting right behind him. Wow. Wow. That sucks. Because he's just raised $30 million in like 4 months. He's broken all sorts of records. And he's done that under the guise of being a flaming lefty. Yeah. Small sources is bullshit. Take a look at the open secrets. Wow. That sucks. That sucks. I mean, because at that point, that means he's running a magnificent dishonest campaign. Vast majority of his donors are large single donors. Is there any truth in the reports that Texas voting machines are? Yes, that's true. Changing votes from Beto to Cruz. Yes, that's true. Any good sources? PBS. I just did the story. PBS. PBS ran with the story. In fact, the Texas official themselves, the person who's, the secretary, has come out and said, yes, the voting machines were flipping votes. It's the same voting machines that's been used all across the United States in various places. 30% of those machines are flipping votes. His argument is that there's nothing wrong with the machines. The problem is that people are moving too fast through the process and that people slow down and wouldn't flip votes. I got a message for you. As a software engineer, if you build a system that the normal way that people use it fucks up, then something is wrong with the system. That's an error. The idea that people go through and vote, and in the process of voting, their vote flips. They don't even have a ticket or something that gives them some indication of who they voted for. It's a black box, meaning you can have all sorts of people who voted. Like I said, 30% of the machines, many of which are in big districts, many of which include the Beto and Beto and Cruz. Yeah, I ran this story earlier. Just look at my thing earlier. I I have the link to the article that I referenced. But the guy from Texas, secretary, who's in charge of this, himself came out and said so. Jamal, being out there in the world is nice, I bet. How has this changed your perspective, if all, thus far? You mean travel? So when I was in 2000, I believe it was 2007, I had a kidney transplant. That kidney transplant failed. And while going into the hospital, when I realized I was going to lose the kidney, I said, fuck it. I'm just going to leave. I got fired from my job while I was literally in the hospital, in which case I had a little bit of money in the bank from working as a software engineer. The girlfriend that I was with at the time was in Australia because her company took her to Australia. I went to see her for her birthday. Blew my mind. At that point, I was hooked. I met a British cat, and the British guy told me, he says, yeah, I'm traveling all over. He says, I let my ex-wife keep the house, and while my ex-wife keep the house, I go traveling. And he's telling me stories about going to Argentina and Mexico and Australia and all these places. And all of this takes place in the context of like a bus ride. And the mold was broken. I couldn't believe it. It never occurred to me that a person can do that. Isn't that amazing? Like, it never occurred to me that as an American, this passport allows me to put my boots on pretty much any bit of ground on this planet. And it never occurred to me that I could do it. After my girlfriend and I at the time got into the screaming match while walking back from the movies one night, that was pretty much the end of that relationship. When I went back home, I estimated that I had about 7 months to travel before all hell breaks loose from the standpoint of health. My body breaks down, and I would need to get some kind of medical treatment. And so I shot myself up with it was a medication that builds. It's not EPO. It was a different medication because I needed. When your kidneys don't work, your kidneys have more operation, more functions than just fluid removal. It deals with vitamin D, calcium. It deals with hematocrit, potassium, all sorts of stuff. Like your kidneys are like a little laboratory. And so couldn't take the chance that my hematocrit was going to drop. And I didn't know the next time I was going to get a shot. So I shot myself up and I booked a ticket to Amsterdam. And I got on a one-way flight to Amsterdam. And I smoked God knows how much pot. I was a walking pot factory. And then from Amsterdam, I went to Egypt. From Egypt, I went overland to Israel. From overland to Israel, I went to Jordan. From Jordan, I took a flight to Nepal. I went bungee jumping in Nepal. Wrecked my body trying to climb up that hill because they didn't tell us that we had to climb back up the hill. And already at this point, I was uremic, like, oh, hell, I was in bad shape. But I still refused to come back home because in my mind, I kept telling myself, don't be a pussy. And ultimately keep going. And I kept pushing. I pushed myself to India. And I booked the ticket to Bangkok with the idea of going from Bangkok to Japan because I wanted to have sushi and see a sumo fight. I woke up one morning, and at this point, I couldn't keep any food down. I was constantly throwing up. And my estimates for 7 months was wildly out of whack. I'll just say it that way, wildly out of whack, wildly optimistic. I couldn't keep any food down. I was uremic. I was in bad shape. I was extremely uremic. And I kept saying, don't be a pussy, keep moving. And as long as I kept moving, I was okay. I couldn't get warm. At some point, I started bleeding through the nose. And in my head, it was still keep moving, keep moving. I woke up one morning and I said, fuck this, I'm going home. It was just kind of a realization. I called my mom. I said, I'm coming back home. She says, You feel bad? I say, yeah. I feel miserable. And I booked the first flight that I can get my hands on back home. And damned if that flight doesn't show up. I've been gone for 2 months, like hardcore traveling and refusing to come back home. And the day that I decided to come back home because I'm in such bad health, the flight doesn't show up. Like literally, the flight doesn't even show up. It doesn't come to the gate, doesn't do anything. And they put us up in a hotel in India, in the nicest hotel I've ever been in my life. 5-star hotel all the way. It was the hotel that was attacked during the terrorist thing, but it was the brand of the hotel, not the hotel itself. It was the same one, but it was the one that was in New Delhi. They put us there for the night. Potable water in India at the time was not something that was there, and yet you could drink all of the water in the hotel in the shower. Hell, if you wanted, you could drink it out the toilet. But in order for them to do that, they have to, like suction water for other parts of the country in order to make it there. Finally, the flight comes. I am in bad shape. Like, I am extremely bad shape. I can't get warm. I'm bleeding from the nose. I'm throwing up. This embarrassing indignity of throwing up in an airport trash can. I finally get back home and my ears are clogged up and I can't hear right. Yeah. I eventually go to the hospital. I didn't go to the hospital the first night because I knew what was going to take place. And when I finally go to the hospital, the doctor is an Indian doctor, and he thinks I'm just skipping treatments. He misses the point that I actually had a kidney before I left, and the kidney just kind of died. I was measuring my urine while I was in Nepal because I needed to keep a fluid balance, because if my fluid balance went too out of whack, the trip was going to end. I wasn't able to tolerate it. I started taking medication over the counter, and so I was trying to find medications that would work well with what's that stuff called? Lasix. Because the thought was there were certain medications that would work in tandem with Lasix. And so I would go over the counter. You could buy that stuff over the counter depending on where you were. If you were in Egypt, you could buy drugs over the counter. And if I'm not mistaken, in India at the time, you could buy them over the counter. And I bought Lasix, everything that the guy had in Egypt. How much do you have? I'll take it all. And when I got into India, I got this other drug that supposedly worked well in tandem with Lasix. I knew I was in trouble when the Lasix stopped working, and when I took more and more of it in order to get the same level of effect, and when the other medication wasn't necessarily working as well. But that said, I still, the goal was to keep going, and so I did what I had to do to keep going. By the time I got back home, all hell broke loose, and they kept me in the hospital, I think, for like a month. When I got out, I took a flight to Ireland, France, London, and Edinburgh, Scotland. And after that, I hadn't traveled in a while. I didn't have the resources to travel, and I didn't have resources to travel, and I had to deal with medical stuff during the course of those years. Eventually, I started working back as a software engineer again, and once I started back working again and started getting back on my feet, once I had enough money in the bank, I, again, would go from flight here or there every so often. But this kicked in high gear when I met my wife again. When her and I met, I kept telling her to get your passport, get your passport, get your passport, get your passport. She didn't listen to me. I booked a flight to Panama. And she was like, motherfucker. She's like, I told you to get your passport. Now, I like traveling solo. So for me, this was a lot of fun. This wasn't a big deal for me to travel solo. It was something I enjoy doing. But after that, she was like, yeah, you asshole. I'm not going to you're not going to use that shit as an excuse anymore. Eventually, I think the first year her and I met, I think we went to Puerto Rico. And it was Puerto Rico because it was the cheapest place. And I had just gotten the job and I wasn't even sure if we were going to have the money for the trip. And it just at the last minute got the job. And so I think the second year we did, I think Paris. And the thing is, we never do one trip. Like for us, we like to do multiple trips. I pick a place, she pick a place, and we stay there for a few weeks. Now, this is problematic because ultimately, wherever we go, I have to get treatments because if I didn't get treatments at this point, the bad things are going to happen. And so I ended up getting like one treatment wherever we go, and I ended up kind of just sucking it up for the next one and just kind of recovering once I get back home. And this tends to be our pattern. So I think we did Paris, Belgium, and I forget the other place. We did Brussels, Paris, and it was somewhere else. I think it was Greece. And then the next year after that, we did, God, these things are starting to blur. But at some point, we're like, God, this is fucking expensive. Like, once you get out of the country, it's cheaper. While you're in the country, like when you have to make the flight to the United States and somewhere else, it is painful, it's painful. I ended up doing a trip to Ecuador by myself because those were dirt cheap. Those are dirt cheap tickets. We ended up doing a trip earlier in the year to, again, because it was dirt cheap, it was Madrid and, God, what is that place called? Madrid and Norway. Yeah, Madrid and Norway. Dirt cheap tickets. And so that's the only reason it worked. It was just so happened it was a gift because she had done amazingly well with the medical coding thing. And so we went there. Her and I ended up getting married in Iceland. We have an Icelandic marriage certificate because Iceland is close to the United States and it is, you have a pulse, you get married in Iceland. France and some of the other countries required a little bit more stuff in order to get married, but Iceland, not so much. And so we ended up getting married in Iceland. We did the Blue Lagoon. Now, in the Blue Lagoon, I recommend anytime you go to Iceland, you got to do this. You got to do this. Now, you have to put your sensitivities to the side. Just saying. You have to get butt naked in order to get into the lagoon. And not just butt naked. It's not a trust issue. There's a guy who's walking through the showers looking at it. Make sure you're butt naked and that you're washing your body. It's the weirdest shit ever. The indignity of this doesn't stop there. There are these things called Hassans. Now, Hassans are, my wife wanted to do this. I have no idea why she wanted to do this, but I ended up doing this with her. You go into, let me say this before, let me do this before I embarrass myself in this. Let's see, where is it? Here we are. The Hassans are, it's kind of like, it's not Turkish, but kind of honesty on candidates. I love almost all of Tim Canova's positions. I love his attitude. I'm deeply concerned about his support for Israel apartheid with the strong support of Israel. It doesn't make him by any measure worse than Debbie does ballots, but we have to be honest. Yes, agreed, Balthasar. I have trouble explaining this to my Leo liberal family and friends, but even though I couldn't support CO3 representative over Hoyer, mealy mouth policy and touting Ken Salazar's endorsement, can't support Jared Polis' no fracking ban. His 100% renewable by 2040, Jesus Christ, 2040, that's way, way out too far. Beyond his and Earth's term, yeah. and Timkanova over in support of Israel. I hope they win as they are improvements, but I personally can't vote for them. Even when you support and you vote for someone, you should be fully informed. Agreed. You should know who you vote for, including their failures. I agree. The Hassan thing was strange. So in this, you go into a thing. It's kind of like a Turkish bath, and it depends on the way you go. The one in Egypt one was weird because there was a woman that has shed all of her Muslim faith or is repudiating her faith in order to do what she's doing. But you have like a loincloth that you have to wear to cover your junk and to cover your ass cheeks. And they put you on the stone slab. Now, the one in Spain, you had this kind of jacuzzi first, like so you can kind of chill in the jacuzzi. Now, saunas, I like. I don't necessarily love it, but I use it because I get to sweat out and I get to remove some of the fluid and some of the impurities from my skin, and it helps from the standpoint of treatments. But after you leave that, there's a woman who's waiting in a room, and you're laying on a stone slab. Now, in Egypt, it was a woman. In the other place, I think it was a guy. And they take this, like, loofah thing, and they scrub you. Now, this is a weird feeling, like you're being scrubbed by somebody. It's like you're a grown person being scrubbed by another human being. Surprisingly fulfilling. This is like, I like being pampered, so fucking A. And they scrub you down, and then they use this loofah sponge, and they're like scrubbing you on the stone slab. I don't like getting naked in front of people. I have too many surgical scars. It makes me self-conscious. I have surgical scars. I've had more surgeries than anybody else than count. I have surgical scars going through here. I have them going through here. I've had 3 surgeries on my stomach. I've had 3 on each of my chests. Not to mention the transplants, not to mention the catheters. Fucking mess. And so I used to be anyway, self-conscious of this. I've become less so as I've gotten older. But, they're professionals. And you get washed like you're some slab of meat. After which case, at that point, they like rinse you off with this thing. And then at some point, somebody says, okay, go. Now, in many other countries, they're not speaking the language. In Egypt, I got a dirt cheap one version of this. The funny part of this is that this woman was pissing my wife off. Did they say your royal penis? The royal penis is clean, sir. No, they didn't say that. But the funny part is, so a guy stops me in Egypt, and he asks me, do I want to get one? Like a Hassan thing. And I said, sure. Why not? He was offering at a dirt cheap price. Like, he cut the price by like 80% because he was trying, it was the end of the night. The woman that's doing this, very attractive, extremely attractive, is hitting on me. My wife is sitting there. Now, she's not hitting on me remotely, but she's hitting on me to a degree where I'm slightly uncomfortable. And she's like black skin. She's like, I like your black skin. I like your black skin. And the earrings and all this other stuff. I was like, I have no idea what you're liking. I am covered in surgical scars. I don't know why you would like this, but whatever. And she's like, she's doing this because she doesn't speak the language. She's like, my wife is looking at her like daggers, shooting daggers. Yeah, she's shooting daggers. She's totally shooting daggers. And then, me, that's a woman that's finding me attractive. So, of course, it's a kiss on the ego. And my wife is like, if that was reversed, And if that was a man that was doing that, fair enough. Fair enough. I think the question was, do I have a different perspective? Yes. Yes. I don't know how you travel and don't get a different perspective. Like, when I say this thing of sitting on the moon, looking at the world, peering at the edge of the world, that's kind of what I mean. It's hard to be in the various countries and not take something from it. I give you a perfect example. In the Middle Eastern countries, it is hard to look at and interact with the people who you go through in the various places and not make an association with these people and the people who were bombing. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. Like, because ultimately, this person of this particular religion, that's nice and kind to me, that maybe drove me to this particular place, that talked to me about this, that explained this to me, that et cetera, et cetera. There's a guy like that in one of the countries that we bombed. There's a guy like that in the countries that we killed. There's a guy like that who was just minding his own business, who probably wasn't doing anything in the countries that we fomented revolutions. And when we foment those revolutions, it's not just the person at the top. When we killed Saddam, it wasn't just Saddam. When we went after Bashar al-Assad, it wasn't just Bashar al-Assad. There was a ton of people who was below him that was just minding their fucking business. Many of the people weren't soldiers. Many of those people were just regular, ordinary people, just like you, just like me. And we have this idea that somehow these people are somehow different. I hate to disabuse you of this. They are not. They're just human beings just like us. If nothing else, when you travel, that's drilled home. That's drilled home like nobody's business. Jamal told the entire story so we can say women could fight him. No. That's not the case. I went to the strip club phase. It's hit or miss. I never went through that phase. I could never, it was always weird to me. One of my friends, Jaleel, was into it. And I remember going to the strip club with him once. It was one in Virginia. And I kept thinking, am I supposed to stare at this woman? like, am I really supposed to stare at this person? And she's like looking at me and she's making me greatly uncomfortable. And I felt entirely uncomfortable in the entire enterprise. I felt like, it's like, oh God, I feel dirty. And these women are talking to me and I'm okay with just talking to them. I enjoy that part. I like to talk to people. But they're talking to me because they wanted me to get a strip, like a lap dance. And the only one person in here that I'm even halfway attracted to, Sparkles, has gotten into a fight with somebody else. It's like, this was a bit much. Baltazar, I went to strip club on a dare. I met one of my classmates. No way. She was in one or two of my classes. Wow. I didn't get off on strip clubs like some guys do, but there's some hot girls and many strip bars have excellent service in bars. It weirded me out, man. It weirded me out. When I remember, she said, would you like a lap dance? I was like, sure, why not? We're in a strip club. You do what people do in the strip clubs. When I'm in Egypt, I smoke shisha. When I'm in a strip club, get a lap dance. And she says, it's 20 for the lap dance. It's an additional 20 to grab my ass. I was like, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that. Because it's weird to simulate this stuff when I'm not taking this woman home. And ultimately, there's a bouncer there that if my hands get too grabby, I'm going to get roughed up. It's a little weird. You went to New York. Yes, I went to NYIT. I went to OL West, 1%ers up there. Well, the New York Institute of Technology, yes, I went to New York Institute of Technology. I lived in New York partially, but the other part, I took it remotely because at that point I had moved back to Virginia. 1%ers up there. Now, I don't know what the 1%ers part. In New York, yes. In New York, yes. New York has 1%ers. Yes. Stripper sound fights in ways more interesting. Yeah, this was weird. So Sparkle, apparently somebody took her money and they locked the entire place down and wouldn't let us leave. And then you could hear her and another stripper get into a fight. It was like, ooh, this is this is, you know, this is, yeah. Yeah, I didn't go there to get off. I don't really like being, I don't like being teased like that either. I felt awkward. When I left the lap dance, apparently I looked shattered, like I looked shook. And the person was like, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." Like, it's just awkward. It's just really bizarre. Oregon is better. California sucks. No alcohol, no nudity. Hot girl grinding on lap. Worth every. Fair enough. So you're just old. My friend used to get off on it like nobody's business. I had a hard time. It just freaked me out. You must understand, like from the standpoint of women, I was never the type that was I was always weirded out by being apprehended, if that makes sense. Like, if it was, how can I say this? That sounds weird. I used to like to be friends. I used to like to know the quantity that I was dealing with. I used to, every woman that I've ever had any encounter or anything else with, we were friends first. I needed to know that the person wasn't a lunatic. This one-time stuff never really appealed to me. If I pay, it loses the fun. Yeah, that too. I want her to do it freely. When it can come freely, yes. Not forgiving at all. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those to each his own things. I think I've only went once. I only needed it once. Maybe the stripper was genuinely titillated by your scars. No. You're that wasn't the stripper. That was the woman who was doing the thing in Egypt. She was in Sharm el Sheikh. So it's kind of weird. When my wife and I think we were in Qatar, we was trying to get a pedicure, and they act like I slapped them. Like, how? Like, ugh, no. Now in Egypt, they didn't have pedicures either. What they ended up having was these things called medical pedicures. Don't do those. Don't do those. I'm giving you fair warning. They had me bleeding. They were like, the guy was bleeding me. But like, I'm looking down like, oh my God, I'm bleeding. And then even when they did my nails, I was bleeding. Yeah, don't do those in Egypt. Don't do those. That's not their thing. Like, they have religious weirdness with that stuff. That said, in Sharm el Sheikh, less so, because they're dealing with tourists who are coming into the country. And so people shed their Muslim values in order to do this for tourists. I don't know why she would have been titillated by scars. I got to be honest, I don't quite understand that one. Krillin876, I don't mind paying for escorts. That way you know where you stand. And look, Krillin, I'm not saying anything is wrong with it at all. To each his own. That's one of those to each his own things. I'm not against prostitution. I think prostitution should be legal. And yeah, I'm not against it. He just wanted to say titillated. That's all it was. He just wanted to use the word titillated. That's all. That's all. Please come to Leipzig. You can have my flat, my car, everything you need. What? Tom Mott, that sounds rough. Garden Gnome, I also hung around the brothels in Nevada. Those aren't so cool. Really? High pressure sales environment, depressing conditions. Oh, you mean the women are pressing up on you, trying to get you to purchase. Oh, that's awkward. That's awkward. I used to think prostitution should be legal until I went to Nevada. Oh, that is awkward, dude. That is awkward. That would be awkward. Like, because it's not just, like, the pressure environment is also this thing of a person thing, right? Like, you saying no is not just you saying no to a business deal. To you saying no is rejection of an individual. Yeah, that's a little awkward. You come to Colorado, I get you so high you forget the university existed. Yeah, I never heard of prostitute, but I checked out the bars. When I was in Amsterdam, I would say this. I regret not getting a prostitute in Amsterdam when I went the first time around. The reason I regret it is not so much that I needed a prostitute. It was more so the reason why I didn't get it. It was out of fear. I hate this idea that fear is being the determinant factor of a choice. It's one thing if I just say, I don't want to do this. It's another thing to say, I'm scared to do this. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. Some women have a nervous instinct that like men who have scars are invalidated. I don't know. It was a little odd, Grant. I mean, I didn't speak the language, so I couldn't understand what she was saying. And she kept doing like, and you know, my wife looks at that and is like, motherfucker. It's like, that bitch. She's like, I'm gonna choke that bitch out. Yeah, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand it. I wish I could speak the language, but I didn't understand it. It was only certain words and certain phrases that I can pick out. She was the one that did the Hassan, and she was the one that did the massage. Amazing massage. No complaints. There's a part of the massage where they climb on a table in Kenya and in Egypt. They climb on a table. I have back pain. I have extremely bad back pain. I couldn't find a chiropractor. The closest thing I've found was a massage, especially focusing on the back and spine. And they would climb on the table and they would like yank your body into these weird shapes. So wild. So wild. But it was good. Nevada is a type of beautiful hellscape. Oh, wow. That's rough. I am for legal prostitution, but after being offered a 13-year-old girl, I won't participate. Oh, God. Are you serious? I know there's different cultural stuff, and I know some of this cultural stuff is relative to one another. Look, if you're going to make an argument against prostitution, to some degree, you make an argument against porn. Chris Hedges, oh, God, I can't believe we're going here. Chris Hedges, it has a bee in his bonnet about porn. Now, I don't see anything wrong if a husband and a wife, or husband or girlfriend, boyfriend, or a guy, girl, whatever, a couple decides that they want to get a little kinky and do it on camera. We want to be voyeurs. We want people to see us and all the good stuff. Or, it's like slap my ass or whatever. Lick my feet or whatever. Toe suckers. Do you, boo. Whatever that is. Have your own expression of what you want to be. Be you. Misfit toys or whatever else. The problem comes when the capitalistic instinct comes into this. So now you have somebody who believes that the only way that they can make their profit or make their ends is by selling something of themselves. So maybe they sell, maybe they get into BDSM. Because BDSM may pay more. And it's not necessarily something they like. They're just doing it because they're getting a paycheck. In which case they're getting the shit beat out of them in a situation where they feel uncomfortable, but they stay within it because they want to get the paycheck. Like, the problem becomes when you add cash into the process. I mean, same thing for the sexual stuff. The moment that cash becomes part of the process and that people are doing this kind of as a job, it becomes a little bit weirder in this case. The problem is cash. That 13-year-old never sells herself if she wasn't selling herself, if that makes sense. If that makes sense. Making it illegal removes the regulation. Yeah, I think it should be illegal. I think it should be legal, so don't misunderstand me. I'm just saying if the argument is made against prostitution, then the argument is also made to some degree against porn. I believe in the determination of the individual. The problem is that determination sometimes has a profit motive associated with it. And that makes it rough. That makes it rough. Like, that makes it gross when you think about it. I mean, because the person offered that 13-year-old purely because they were going to make profit off that 13-year-old being offered. If there was no profit to be made off of that, that 13-year-old never does porn, or that person never becomes a prostitute. It's a rough one, man. That's a rough one. That 13-year-old was not selling herself. Yeah, no, that's my point. That's my point. She wouldn't be sold at all if there was no profit motive. Yeah. There's no alternative legalization. No, there's not. Because fact is, you're going to have that prostitution regardless. And either you regulate it or you have it as a black market. And I got to be honest, of those two, the black market seems worse. Black market is worse. It's economics 101. Essentially, if money is involved, the motives are screwed. Yes, out the window. It's not a person out of pure self-determination of, I just want to get my rocks off and I want people to see me, you know. Or some guy saying, I want this woman to beat the shit out of me with a whip and kick my ass, and I want to do it on camera because I want to be embarrassed, because they have that instinct in them that they want to do it. There's some people who have those things where they want to be subs or they want to be doms, and there are people who, for the most part, can meet those ends. And they find other people, and they sometimes like to put that on camera for various reasons. That's purely self-determination in that process. That's self-driven. That's not because of money. That's not because somebody's paid to do it. That's because they just like to do it. When I started my show, I just did it because I like to do it. There wasn't any motive behind it. It was just I enjoyed doing the news. I still enjoy doing the news. The only difference is I try to make ends off of it, which, again, to some degree, changes how you do the news to some degree, because you want to maximize your time and profit and all this other stuff. Porn is no different. Like, it's one thing if a wife enjoys it. It's one thing if a guy enjoys it. But the moment that you say, all right, I am paying you a certain amount, now I need you to act and behave a particular way in order to make that profit. And the woman that's involved in the process now may make fake noises. She may make all, like pretending that she's, whatever. But all of this stuff is by virtue of her being paid a job and a wage, or him being paid a job and a wage. The BDSM world. Chris Hedges talked about going to kink.com, the BDSM stuff. And he saw these people kind of hanging around in costumes and all that, and people beating the shit out of each other. Again, there's no issue with this as long as this is self-determination. The issue gets weird when it's this person is getting the shit kicked out of her because she needs to make a paycheck. And it makes it that much like, ugh. It's one thing if she enjoys this. It's another thing if she doesn't. The fact is, there are a lot of people who do this stuff that don't necessarily enjoy it. They're doing it just for the paycheck. Same thing with porn. That there's going to be a percentage that's doing this purely for the paycheck. And I suspect there's going to be a larger percentage because at that point it becomes a job. It gets a little weird. Interstellar Probing 5. Oh. Project people aren't commodities like opioids. If Nike were able to get into prostitution, the exploitation would be out of control. Yeah, I mean, look, there's some markets that we don't particularly allow. My problem is self-determination. An individual should be able to do what an individual wants, even if that individual wants to sell the commodity of sex. The commodification of sex. Look, sex is commodified in everything that we watch. When you turn on television, when you turn on, looking at billboards, when you're walking through a mall, they commodify sex. A woman opens a Coke and she drinks it and she's smoking hot. Why is she smoking hot drinking a Coke? Why does she need to be smoking hot drinking a Coke? Or the sexiest bathroom in the world, where that's literally what it's called. And it has these men with no shirt on in their underwear, and they're like, and they're doing all of these poses and whatnot. Why? Why do you have these naked men in the bathroom? Why is this necessary? Well, Nicholas Locke, because I do have this thing of self-determination. I don't like this idea of people not being able to make their choices. The question becomes whether or not the individual choice adversely affects another human being. And at the point where it adversely affects another human being, then we have a different matter we're talking about. But in this case, this is choice. This is choice. This conversation is getting really raunchy. Jesus Christ. But it's a highbrow conversation about porn. It's fucking phenomenal. Chris Hedges hates porn, but Chris Hedges was a minister. And so his religious upbringing in some degree is bleeding into his commentary. But Chris Hedges does have a point in this when he kind of makes this thing of this deterioration of the society and how a certain degree of sadism has affected porn. But the thing is, Chris Hedges would have been against porn regardless. According to Republican logic, prostitution isn't real. If money equals speech, you're simply using free speech to tell someone you'd like to have you'd like to have sex. Oh God. It's funny. Mrs. Tree 1, unexplored regions. I'll take you to places you... What? What? I'll take you to places you've never dreamed of. Oh, God. You'd be surprised how my dreams of pretty magnificent dreams. Robert Bouquet Ray shows how capitalist system needs to counterbalance to human exploitation urges. Yes. 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 Yes, yes, yes. Look, it's exploitation regardless. I mean, whatever the work, especially if there's a percentage of the money that's going to this capitalist class that allows the capitalist class to exist in the first place. The question becomes, what exploitation is too much? I don't like this idea of an individual making a choice and that being criminalized when it's an individual choice. I mean, I feel the same way about pot. You know what I mean? It's like an individual decides to smoke pot and now the government is going to put the person in jail. Why are you putting that person in jail for an individual choice? I feel that way about all drugs. All drugs should be decriminalized. You deal with the drug with this understanding that people will do the drug regardless, potentially. What is the problem in your society where people are using hard drugs in the first place and opioids? In the United States, instead of them trying to deal with the issue of why people are binging on drugs or whatever, they don't do it that way. They criminalize the process. And they go after doctors who's prescribing pain medication. My doctor, I have neuropathy. Early on in life, when I first started treatments, I started when I was 17. And because I started at such a young age, I was hard-headed. And this thing of self-determination, even back then, even though I didn't understand it as that, I went long period of time without treatments, like month on end. My doctor said, you can't last for a month. I lasted for a month. In another case, I tried to treat myself using herbs. I was able to maintain my blood pressure. I was even able to get rid of the fluid that was on. At this time, I had gotten a degree in holistic nutrition, and then after I got a degree in holistic nutrition, I had started studying herbology, and I started getting a certificate in herbology from Dr. Christopher's herbology school, and I was going to go further with it to get more complex understanding of herbs and synergistic relationships between those things. I became somewhat cynical of that process. That's it. I had gotten relatively good at understanding what the herbs were doing and the combinations and stuff like that, in addition to the holistic nutrition. And I was, again, treating myself in order to try to lower the amount of fluid content. The thing is, I didn't quite understand the biology component, meaning I didn't understand the glomeruli and the role of the glomeruli in the kidney itself, and how the filtration systems of the kidney were being destroyed. Meaning, any system that was going to fix that issue from the standpoint of kidney failure would have had to repair the glomeruli. And unless it did that, pissing in the wind. I was 19. I didn't know that. Did not know that. Needless to say, I caused a lot of damage. I had to walk with stilts for a while because the nerves in my legs had been essentially eaten away. Fortunately, I was 19, and because I was 19, my body had recuperative powers at that age, and it took a year or so, but eventually the ability to walk and everything else came back. The feeling or the nerves, not so much. Or at the very least, they didn't come back fully. That took maybe 5 or 6 years for that to come back. And that was more so a sensory neuropathy at that point. I interpret it as pain, even though it's not really pain. And the only thing that really works with that is tramadol during breakthrough moments. My doctor gets freaked out because he's under a watch like all other doctors are under watch. And so even though you're prescribing something for something that goes back for like 20 years, that has a clear record of it, that's being treated by other stuff, but this is more so through breakthrough, he's still completely freaked out by prescribing the medication. Instead of them going after why people would use a particular medication, they're going after people just using the medication. It's a ass backwards way of doing it. It's the same way we deal with crime. Instead of figuring out and saying what in your society is causing the behavior of the individual that's creating this particular crime, especially if you have something that's happened in this kind of extended way. Like we have mass shootings every day, nearly every day. Well, that's a fundamental question. And why does your society produce mass shootings? Other countries don't produce mass killers in this way. Why do you? What is the problem with your society that's doing it? We never interrogate those. We just always go to the end result and say people have free will and all this other nonsense. So yeah. Yeah. Did he say royal penis clean? No, they did not. No, they did not. And there was no cleaning of the penis, by the way. All right. I'm going to end this. This has gone on for like 2 hours. God, I can't believe this went on for 2 hours. This was supposed to be like 30 minutes. All right, guys. I always enjoy this, though. The back and forth. And if I'm being honest, that's why I have patron appreciations in the first place. I appreciate you guys supporting the content. Honestly, I do. I am not the best at this part because, if I'm being honest, I did this just to do the news. But I felt like I needed to give something back because, I mean, ultimately, you guys allow me to do what I love. So, thank you very much. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support the content through Patreon. Thanks all. Let's see.